I see no test of that yet whatsoever. Rhetoric doesn't, 94, other things. People talk a good game in this country. When are we going to wake up to the fact that it doesn't mean anything? And in point of fact, I do see one good thing that has come from the very fear that you are talking about, is that it seems to be giving pause to a lot of Democrats about supporting arrogant efforts in this lame duck session to force things down the throat of the majority that just kicked the Democrats out of power in the House. That is a good thing. But the real test of this situation, Stan, can possibly have come yet, since we're not going to know what is, in fact, the availing result of this for America until we see what goes on in the course of the next year or so in the Congress.
I certainly agree with you. That's why I'm saying we're seeing less of it. I didn't say it's gone. I think we're seeing...
Well, no, but I'm arguing we are in a context where we see nothing. This is all meaningless.
Well, you just mentioned the lame duck session where they could have passed the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. It's not going to happen. They could have passed the DREAM Act. It's not going to happen. They could have passed a number of things that simply won't happen. So in that respect...
that's what I was saying. In other words, I think that the people can be encouraged. They should see the fruit of their willingness to stand on what is right for this country. And I think that is clear. There is a pause, shall we say, in what had been the bipartisan juggernaut of the destruction of our republic. But we've seen these pauses before. Strategic pauses don't necessarily indicate anything. A lot of the quiet battles that have gone on in terms of leadership positions in the House and things of this kind are battles that are being decided in a way that is not necessarily reassuring. With a lot of the same old kinds of folks moving into positions of leadership and et cetera. We'll see. But I am simply cautioning people because the only thing I think proven by what's going on right now is that when the people wake up and move and really show that they're going to be and stay involved, then this gives them pause. The elites that are, I think, so hostile to government of, by, and for the people. But the key is going to be follow-through, Stan. And that follow-through is going to have to be seen over the course of the next couple of years in terms of whether or not folks at the grassroots are going to insist on American policies, if I can put it that way, or whether they're going to let things drift while the do-nothings pretend something's happening and leave in place the damage that's already been done until they feel we're not paying attention anymore. That's the way it has happened before.
And I couldn't agree with you more. I look at a couple of numbers that cannot be argued. When Barack Obama was inaugurated, the budget was $3.5 trillion, obscenely and egregiously large. In the 2-year period he's been there, the budget has gone from $3.5 trillion to $5 trillion. In addition, there has been $1 trillion worth of slush spent. So in essence, you could add $0.5 trillion to each of those 2 years if that's the way you want to look at it. In addition, we've increased the number of federal workers by 300,000. In addition, the pay of federal workers has increased by in the neighborhood of 40%, while the compensation of the private sector has actually decreased to where now the public sector is making more than double, on average, $163,000 versus $61,000 what the private sector is making. So until the Republicans, forget the Democrats, until the Republicans say we're going to roll back to $3.5 trillion, which isn't enough of a rollback, but until they say in real dollars, we're going to go back to $3.5 trillion, in real numbers, we're going to reduce the federal workforce by 300,000, and in real numbers, we're going to reduce the pay of federal workers to the pay of the private sector. Until they do that, as far as I'm concerned, they're all full of bean soup.
We can see, though, one of the things, and I read a column today, I don't know if you saw it, but it was Tom Sowell's column, And he wrote a column about the discussion and debate taking place over what's going to happen with the Bush tax cuts, right, that are expiring. And he said that you have these Democrat leftists out there, and they're making their arguments, which are fallacious and don't really hold water. There are really good arguments to be made that if you look at the history and experience, this notion that somehow or another, if you cut everybody's taxes, rather than adopt this class warfare attitude and say we're going to make the rich pay and so forth and so on, when you cut everybody's taxes, that actually has the effect of increasing economic activity, increasing the revenue of the government, and increasing the prospects of economic expansion, job creation, and so forth. That's been the record of the tax cut approach, as opposed to the record of the stimulus approach, where you let the government hog the dollars and then pretend to use those dollars to stimulate economic activity through phony stimulus programs that don't produce results. He was making the case that there are clear arguments, there's a historical record, there are facts, and that the Republicans, you find them out there strenuously making this case. He was arguing, no, they're not. And the headline of his column was, "Can Republicans talk?" Because he's not hearing them talk about these things, right? I think we can see some signs here that the message that folks were sending, step one, it's not clear to me it got through. It's not clear to me in any number of ways. I think that it got through to the extent that these folks are saying, well, we got to worry. How do we manage these people? How do we control this reaction? How do we contain this damage to our power? I think that's how they're thinking. Rather than thinking, how do we serve an agenda that's good for the restoration of our Constitution and for government of, by, and for the people, and the sovereignty of America, and the integrity of our foreign policy, and the integrity of our domestic institutions? This doesn't appear to be on their minds, that positive agenda. And that's what disturbs me. All this talk of how much they've done and how well they've done and how they're going to take this and that in the next election. I'm thinking, who cares about these parties? I care about this country. And I would like to hear a whole bunch of talk that forgets party and talks only about what is in fact going to deal with the crisis of this country. And does it, by the way, Stan, in a fundamental way, because I think it's all well and good to tinker around the edges of the disaster they've created. That I think in point of fact we need now to look hard at the remedies that will in fact help to restructure the way we approach these policy issues, to get away from the assumptions, failed assumptions of socialism and the welfare state, and put this country on a sound bottom of 21st century respect for the mechanisms that could unleash the initiative and creativity of our people if we once again restore full respect for the potential of individuals and private sector entities to do what they need to do. I don't see the Republicans moving down that road. I see them instead saying, well, you know, there's these parts of the health care proposal that we'll need to keep, and there's this and there's that and the other thing. The notion, for instance, that they might come in and start not just, you know, strenuously saying, no, we don't want to mess with what we've already done to let Americans keep their money. So we got to extend these tax cuts. Strenuously argue it, make a big issue out of it, which they're not doing. I think that would be useful. But I also think that they need to put square on the table the fact that we are suffering the consequence now of an income tax system that gives the government a lion's share of control, of a Federal Reserve system that gives a little elite a lion's share of control of our national income, and that we're not going to see a turnaround either in our political resilience and strength or our economic resilience and strength until we break the hold of these archaic 20th century approaches to economics and politics that saw centralization as the key, when in fact it is the networked decentralization that is going to produce the greatest outburst of energy on behalf of human productivity and real progress.
Again, I couldn't agree more, and I believe that I was saying exactly that in my less eloquent way, that if government is not cut down in people, in consumption of revenue, and in compensation for those who work for government, because I've quoted this before and I'll quote it again. You're right, the idea of stimulus doesn't work, and the reason it doesn't work is that what was done with the extra revenue, stimulus or otherwise, whatever you want to call it, is it was used to reward and build slush funds. It wasn't used to do things that would generate jobs, because they don't know how to do that, and they don't want to do that. They want the government, because when government takes a dollar, it consumes the large percentage of that, and what goes back in the economy is a relatively small percentage. If we would just cut the size of our government down by 25, 30, 40%, if we would cut its use of funds, not saying, well, we'll balance the budget by increasing taxes, but rather we'll balance the budget by decreasing what government takes, well, that money left in the economy would do just what you're talking about.
I believe that's right. But let's take a hard look at what would be needed in really to achieve that kind of revamping. Because in order to achieve that kind of retrenchment, you would have to change the whole approach. That's why I say you've got to start tackling the issues of what replaces the archaic dinosaur of the failed welfare state junk that was prevalent and that was accepted or promoted by both parties in the course of the 20th century. As long as we are willing to embrace what amounts to a bipartisan surrender to socialism in whatever form, then what are you going to do about the entitlement programs to Social Security and things of this kind? There must be alternatives that are going to create a situation in which we can get out from under the kind of outrageous commitments that were represented by this surrender to socialism. But that isn't something you can do by just looking at a line item here and tinkering with a little cut back there. You are going to have to find a different approach in a structural sense, a different understanding of government, and a different set of assumptions about what we rely on to deal particularly with the issues of social welfare. And that's a debate that the Republicans don't even want to engage in. The simple fact that we must engage a fundamental debate. Is it the business of government to take care of the welfare of individuals? And the answer to that question that was clear in the founding vision of our country is no, that's not the business of government. The business of government, particularly at the national level, is restricted to a certain small set of items that affect the national interest and security and safety and order of our people. That in terms of dealing with the welfare of individuals from the cradle to the grave, there are other, more effective social institutions. And the business of government would be to maintain an orderly environment in which those institutions can flourish. And instead of that, by the way, we see two parties willing to quietly promote the same stupid understanding of government and to connive at the agendas that include the agenda of assault on the integrity of the family that actually eliminate those alternatives to government when it comes to taking care of people. And so I think, I just see so much that's going on with lip service and shallow junk, and I don't see anything that corresponds to the deep, serious thought that needs to be given to facing the structural realities that must be dealt with if we're to get away from the monster of socialist big government that has pushed us over the brink of bankruptcy. I don't see the Republicans doing this. I don't hear it really in a serious way from any quarter. And I'm trying to listen.
I think your points. Well, maybe we're going to take a break. We'll be back with Dr. Alan Keyes and you right here on Talk to Sullivan.
Want to talk? So let's talk.